In this clip, we'll be painting rust and grime on the legs. Alright, this is one of my favorite parts here. Getting to paint in all the grit. So let's go ahead and set up our brush again. We're going to want a smaller size and flow. Bring that spacing down to 5. And we do in this case want our flow on both, or excuse me, our pressure sensitivity on flow and size. Set our brush or alignment to camera. And we do not want a white this time, we want a dark orange, red, brown. So let's get it right in there. Let's bring it really, really dark. Okay, let's make a new layer. Call this Grime. And I'm gonna, this will be one of those where I don't show you the entire thing because this takes a while. But I do want to show you the way that I put in the grime and the rust and the patterns that I'm looking for in placement and just the kind of brush strokes and stuff. So let's get started. I'm going to bring my brush size down just a little bit more. There we go. So let's start under here. Something like this is a good opportunity. It really helps to think in terms of the mechanics of something like this and where somebody would put grease and where rust might form. And that's going to help your painting look a lot more natural. So I'm just going to start right in here on these seams. And let's bring our flow up just a bit more. There we go. So this would be a place that they would have greased under here and it's kind of leaking out of this seam and dripping down. And that kind of thing will give your placement a lot more just subconscious believability. And I try and keep in mind, particularly for this, where it's something that's flowing, this would be something kind of dripped out, like what kind of pattern would it leave? So when it comes out of here, you know, it's going to get thinner as it rolls, but then at the end you kind of get a drop that forms. So you might darken it and enlarge it just a little at the end. And people, I think, subconsciously will appreciate that and expect it. And then you can also just do kind of like we were doing with the scratches, where you just have little bits of detail. And it's also a great way that highlights these inner edges, a sort of secondary AO. It's even darker and more pronounced. But again, here, this grease leaking out, it would have started to run down here. And those kind of details just really make, I mean, already you can just see how much more natural and alive this looks. Now dirt and grime will also get caught on edges like this, especially on these bigger scratched edges. It can look really nice to go in and add something like that. And in this case, I probably wouldn't have it flow like the grease, but this is more where stuff is just getting caught. So let's do that here as well. And that, in turn, just serves to bring out the scratches in the metal, and everything just kind of self-reinforces. So definitely going to put grime around this screw where it would totally get caught in here. It's kind of a prime place for that. So all that would kind of leak out and drip over here. Right in there. Perfect. Yeah, that kind of thing is exactly what brings this to life, and that's why it's probably my favorite part of the process, because this is where I start to see, oh, this is cool now. Unfortunately, this takes forever, as you can see, and I'm not going to repeat this on everything, but the same process will apply. A piece like this, I'm not going to do as much grease other than like under these where it makes sense, but I would do more of the grime type thing in here where it makes sense to add to the edges of our larger scratches. So let's switch over to rust. And the rust is similar, but I like to add a little bit more color and a little bit more color variation. So we're going to take this dark brown and we're going to lighten it up just a little bit. I'm going to leave my color up here because I'm going to be switching a lot. And what I'd like to do with this is find those areas where water might have settled or started to eat away at metal like this. And I'm going to, first off, I'm going to bring my brush size down. I'm just going to kind of tap on here and just start to bring some of this forward. Actually bring my flow up a little bit. You can probably hear it. I'm just tapping on this edge. The rest should have a little bit more of a flaky feel. And this is just a little bit lighter than what we were having, so as I do that, I'm going to bring it up just a little bit more and just start to add in some of that. Make this just a little touch redder. A little darker again. It's all about kind of layering up the lights and darks in different colors so that you don't have any one thing too prominently. I'll bring it up much lighter. And just a little of that in there. Like crank our saturation. A little redder. A little oranger. A little lighter. And we'll bring it much darker. And I don't like to do this everywhere, but it does add a little bit more detail in certain spots and is worth the time it takes. Just so something pops out from just the more flat grease effect and catches your eye. So you can see there's just adding that little bit of differentiation between this and this. And obviously it's a lot more time consuming because you're having to switch colors a lot. You're having to switch darkness, lightness, back and forth, get that variation. But it's a cool effect when it's all said and done. And you can go back and forth with that all day long. And just a few little highlights there. And it's easy to get carried away, and I probably added too much in here in all my layering, but that's easy enough to pull back on, and you can play with your layers as well, just to give you just enough to be interesting. Now on top of that, sometimes I'll add larger grease patches, so I'll go back to my dark brown, switch back to my grime layer, and I'll do very low flow, but large size brush, not that big. There we go. And I might add, think in terms of mud and large dust would have kind of collected here, so I'll add a little too saturated. I'll bring that down and bring it a little darker. I'm going to take the flow or the pressure off my size. So we might add just a touch. Oh, there we go. Let's back to our paintbrush. Just a touch of overall dust and grime. Bring that down. Something like that kind of thing. Now that's probably a bit too much. I'll erase that. Bring my flow down even more. There, you're starting to see it. Just a overall sense of dirt, and you can play with the saturation and whatnot, but I like it to feel probably more orange than red, just a little lighter. Dirt can catch up in places like that. That adds some color into your metals and just makes things start to stand out a little in those patches. And again, you can add as little or as much of that as you feel is necessary. And that's the basics of our grime and rust and dirt. Again, that takes a while over all of this, but it's really adds a lot.